I'm Carolyn Baker, and I'm here with my dear friend Andrew Harvey, and we are planning to do today what we love to do most, which is to make radical mischief. And we're probably going to come to you in this way, maybe every couple of weeks, and have a conversation that we like to call Elderspeak. So we have
And
just
this conversation is about the themes of the book that we've
yeah,
just produced for you. Ah, there you've got a copy. My God, it
radical
exists. I'm
regeneration.
dying to see it.
Yeah,
Radical regeneration, which we plunged into this year, which we spent a great deal of this year really getting as clear as possible. So onward.
yeah. So one of the things that we talk about in the book, among many, many other things, is the dark night in which we find ourselves right now, the global crisis. And why don't you begin with your perception, and then I will certainly jump in with mine.
Well, the Dark Knight is an evolutionary ordeal, and we have a comprehensive, all embracing Dark Knight as part of the defining moment of human history, and it's upon us. And it's all so obviously nakedly terribly upon us because the coronavirus is exploding out of control, although there is hope of the vaccine. And we're in this major, major crisis of soul in America with the Mad King and his depraved courtiers shredding the Constitution on the lawn of the White House. So it's completely clear to us, as it is clear to all those who come to our vision in the book, that unless we really confront and align with this dark night in as full a way as possible, we're not going to learn its lessons, and we're going to potentially join its destructiveness and abet its destructiveness in annihilating the human race. I think everybody who's half awake is awake to the fact that there are five major crises out there. There's the coronavirus, there's the climate catastrophe, there's the destruction of wildlife, there's the immense economic crisis that is growing, and then there's a spiritual crisis of meaninglessness and apathy and death of truth. And that all of these crises are coming together to really make clear to us that we have got to get aligned with radical regeneration, the new laws of truth and communion and compassion, or as a race, this adventure is finished.
Absolutely. And you know, Andrew, the thing that is so wonderful about how we have worked together for the last 6 years is we say a lot of the same things in different language.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes.
And so, as you were talking about aligning with the Dark Knight, I am thinking, yes, absolutely. And the way I perceive that or articulate that is that we are in a planetary rite of passage, that we are going through this massive species initiation,
That's it.
that we have no guarantee, as with any initiation, we have no guarantee that we'll survive. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but we know we must turn up for this experience because it's an evolutionary ordeal. I love what you said, an evolutionary ordeal. Why the ordeal? So that we will be compelled to go deep within ourselves and find the divine within, to connect with the sacred self, which is greater than any of these things that are going on around us, and utilize that to transform our own consciousness and to
Right.
serve the planet.
And let's look at the two great crises that are really on everybody's heart mind. Of course, anyone who's awake knows that we're in a mega crisis of the climate. That crisis has been with us for a while. But now the two crises that are truly afflicting us are the rising pandemic, the exploding pandemic, and the Trump lunacy that's exploding in the White
Well,
House.
the division that is among us, the
Yes,
complete,
terrible division and the incredible difficulties of healing that it now will impose on us.
yes, yes.
But let's look at the coronavirus and
Oh,
what is this initiation passage in this virus? What do you think we need to get real about with this virus?
Well, I think it's a very humbling experience, among other things. It's a very humbling experience that is asking us to pay attention to the earth because, you know, in the book, we go into how this virus came from our destruction of the earth.
75% of viruses do, yes.
Yeah, and
Of pandemics, yeah.
we can plan on more because, you know, I don't see us slowing that destruction down or stopping it by any means. So that's one of the first lessons. Okay, I am here to teach you what happens when you destroy me, says the earth. And it's time for you to get out of your denial and your comfort zone. You know, so many people, I'm sure you saw photos of the airports right now.
That's what I'm out of my mind with
I
anguish at
know.
this.
And
What more proof do we need of the narcissism of a culture that feels that it can be in control of this uncontrollable pandemic and cannot even bother to put a bloody mask on, or cannot heed the warnings that every single medical expert has taken, that traveling and Thanksgiving is inviting either death for yourself or death for somebody you're going to. This is a shattering indictment of our inability to listen to anything, isn't it?
well, I think, you know, we use that word a lot, narcissism, but I'm sorry to say, I think that is part of what's going on. I heard
Right.
a young man being interviewed today at O'Hare at the airport, and he said, well, I just go see my family once a year, and this crisis has been so hard. It's been so hard to be separated, you know, this is going to make me feel better.
Make me feel better.
Make me feel better. My God, what about the people that you might be taking this virus to? I heard a guy the other day say, you can't make me, you can't tell me not to go visit grandma. And I'm thinking, you know,
Yes, we can, because if you've got asymptomatic complexities, you could kill grandma. That would be a good reason not to go.
and, you know, I'm also thinking, you know, we're not telling you anything. We're begging on our hands and knees. We're pleading with you. Don't do this to grandma. Don't do this to other people that you will come in contact with on the way to see grandma.
But doesn't this open up really devastating clarities about American society?
Oh, yes,
The
absolutely.
entitlement and narcissism that have been epidemic for years now becoming lethal, and the false notion of what freedom really is, the
Oh,
completely irresponsible vision of freedom
yes.
that has characterized so much, especially of the right's rhetoric about
Yeah,
freedom.
yeah. And you know,
You're
in our,
free to make money, but somehow you're not free to look after the poor. You're free to get a Malibu mansion, but you're not free to take care of the earth.
right.
It goes on and on. This
It
is a
does.
sickness of the mind and the heart that is now exploding in a way that's threatening thousands and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives.
And you know, part of what we talked about toward the end of radical regeneration, we talked about nobility of soul.
Right.
Why did we talk about that? Because when you allow this regeneration to take place in you, you are really caring about other beings. And
Right.
and in America, we just have lost this sense of the commons, and we've lost a sense of paying attention to science. You know, we just act like science doesn't exist and we don't have to pay attention to it, especially if it interferes with our freedom.
But let's face it, for the last years, there's been this wholesale attack from the right on climate science,
Yes,
which has prepared the ground for the
absolutely.
denial of the science around COVID, which has prepared the ground for America being the deadly birthing ground of the biggest and most lethal epidemic in the world.
Yes,
So
yes.
how would you suggest that people listening align themselves with this as an initiation? What are we going to learn from this about American society, about what really needs to be looked at, and about how everyone needs to claim both responsibility and the need to act wisely and compassionately? That's the key to the thesis, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And, any adversity that really breaks our heart or makes us physically ill or shatters us emotionally, we could call that an initiation or a rite of passage. And there are steps that we go through. We
Right,
talked about 3 steps in the initiatory process, which are, the vision of possibility, where you understand that this is an ordeal that has a purpose. And the purpose is your own enlightenment, your own transfiguration, and then making you a person of service.
right,
Okay, so there's a purpose. And then there's the ordeal. You can't just say, well, okay, that's the purpose, I'll go do these things. No, you have to go through the ordeal, which is a descent into the body, a descent into the dark emotions. And, it's a bloody hell and back, is what it is.
right.
Yeah. And then, there is this coming through, this coming home, and taking that and acting on it to serve other living beings.
But the initiation is vastly complicated in this process
Yes.
by the fact that half the nation that's been misled by mistruth is totally unwilling to go through these initiatory stages.
Well,
So there are
there
two
has
possible responses to that. Either that we give up and say, they're not going to do it, so why should we? Or we do it with even more focus and compassion and intensity because we realize that the whole potential future, threatened though it is by all of this lunacy, depends on us.
if we go through an initiation consciously knowing what it is and being open to the evolutionary process, we become spiritual warriors.
Right.
And
And
we also
midwives.
become
Yeah.
spiritual midwives. And so, there are very few people who are willing to do that. So we're writing this book to the people who are open to, what do I do? What do I do? Well, we tell you what to do. And that is to be open to this rite of passage, to allow yourself to go through it, to get the support you need to go through it, and then to come forth and serve as a result of this hell that you've been to and come back from.
One of the things that we can all do right now is to start supporting the frontline workers who are
Yes, yes.
absolutely flayed with exhaustion and heartbreak and who
Mhm.
feel totally abandoned by the government, which has been AWOL with homicidal negligence, genocidal negligence,
Yes.
call it what it is,
All right.
and also abandoned by the narcissistic side of the populace who claim their own freedom as an excuse not to follow the minimal guidelines that prevent the hospitals becoming so overloaded that the frontline workers go out of their minds with grief and suffering.
Mhm.
That's the first thing that we need to do. What are the things that we do you feel that we need to do in this? How do we need to prepare for the coronavirus to do its great initiatory work on us? How do we need to humble up and align ourselves with it to get to the next level of our own spiritual evolution, our own radical regeneration through this dark night, this savage initiation?
Well, I think we start out with something as basic as we follow those guidelines, and we allow ourselves to be humbled before the awe of this huge virus. It's just this little microscopic thing that is changing the world. It's changing the planet. And at the beginning of our book, I wrote a poem and you wrote a prayer, to the wonderful divine Kali. And we said, Divine Mother, we know that you are using this to teach us something. Help us to be open to it, to learn from it. And then I would say any acts of service that we can do, if there's some way we can support a healthcare worker, if there's, I try to support the small businesses, and I get a lot of takeout food and I leave big tips. Not that I'm a big spender, but I really want to see these businesses that are doing good things succeed.
I've been working with the homeless, so I take a certain amount of money every day and walk around and find the people who've been sleeping out
Me too.
because they don't want to be in a petri dish of. There's so much we can do.
Oh,
And
yes.
we can also, and I think this is very important, we can also look at the social facts which tell us that Latinos and African Americans are being targeted terrifyingly by the virus and abandoned
Yes.
by the authorities, and really face the systemic racism that allows for this virtual genocide to
Right.
take place, which means really stepping up and supporting the new wave of Democrats that are hopefully coming in soon and can start to deal with these problems. We've got to let the coronavirus be a light that opens up all the dark shadows of our culture so that we can embrace the terrible material of
Yeah.
what it actually reveals, and reveals inescapably that we have a demented government at the moment, totally inefficient and homicidal, that we have a totally unequal society in which rich people can protect themselves and poor people die and essential workers die and Latinos die and Black people die, which shows that this society is deeply sick and needs to be transformed, and that we have a crazy attitude to science. On the one hand, we use its applications and its technology with entitled ease, and on the other, we question its severe, rigorous analyses. What's up with that? What's up with that schizophrenia? We
Well,
need to learn to respect what we are being told, the truth about what's happening.
we respect science when it gives us fancy computers and speeds up our Wi-Fi. But
Right.
when it sets any limits on us, like here are the limits, here are the parameters you must follow to be safe, then we immediately regress into 4-year-olds. Well, you can't tell me what to do. I'll do what I want to do. Well, it doesn't work that way. Science is science.
Or
And
crazier still, we regress into conspiracy theories.
yes,
Some of my most intelligent friends believe that Bill Gates and George Soros, and I can't remember else, have organized this whole thing so that they can inject us with a vaccine which has DNA altering things in it so that we can become perpetual slaves of the great machine.
right. Yes, I've heard
This
that.
kind of bullshit is insane making. Some people actually believe the coronavirus isn't happening at all, a great many people. And as you know, there have been people who've been dying
Yeah.
who refuse to acknowledge that they have the coronavirus, saying it must be something else because the coronavirus isn't real. What is behind that horrific lack of discernment which has imprisoned so many people in our culture, do you think? What is that? Because it's extremely frightening.
It's very, very frightening. And, in our talk that we had recently with Dar Jamal, that I'm just trying to send all over the planet, he
Right.
talked to us about how, back in the Reagan era in 1980, there began to be this assault on a lot of things. And one of the things that was assaulted was education. And so more and more courses on critical thinking were eliminated, and the whole notion that you should even critically think at all was eliminated. And
Mm.
Reaganism was the era of narcissism and greed, and let's just do whatever we want. And so we've come into a culture that really has not much critical thinking, that doesn't have much respect for science.
Or
And
authority of any kind, yeah.
yeah, and well, it has respect for authority if the
Yes, I mean
authority,
for
yeah,
intellectual, spiritual
yeah,
authority.
if it says, yes, yes, make
Yes,
America great again. Yeah,
right.
yeah. I was very happy to hear today General Mattis got a chance to speak. And he said, one of the things I would ask our president-elect to do as you structure foreign policy is to get rid of the phrase America first.
It has to go because it's a part of this fantasy cocktail, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is.
Patriotism, hatred of science, and racism. What an appalling cocktail to arise, really, and to have such an impact. Let's turn to the other horror that's erupting everywhere, which is the horror of the slaughter of democracy in full view by a sitting president. The reality is, Carolyn, that you and I have known that this was likely. We wrote about it in Savage Grace. We knew that he had fascist authoritarian tendencies, and so did the people who voted for him, whether they knew it or not, and that as soon as he would come in, he would implement those tendencies. He has. We have systematically stood up and said, this is insanely dangerous.
Yes.
Speaking for myself, I didn't realize completely how far he and his depraved cronies would go once the election had passed to Biden. So this has been a wake-up call for me too, because it shows just how urgent the analysis that we make in our book, Radical Regeneration, truly is. Its prescience has shocked me and challenged me.
Yes, me too.
Have you felt the same?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, critical thinking and I don't want to say lack of education, because most people get high school diplomas, but a lack of real wisdom and discernment, because all these conspiracy theorists running around are saying, well, we don't want Biden in there because he's a socialist. They have no idea what socialism is. They have no idea what fascism is. And when you don't even know what those things are, then you can be manipulated and you can buy into all sorts of conspiracy theories, which is what's happening.
Well, the central fact is the most bewildering, that here they are saying the elections were rigged by Hugo Chavez and God knows who. And there isn't a single shred of evidence. The courts are killing these cases one by one. And yet there are at least 60%, it seems, of the Republicans who believe this. What's going on? What is this insanity? Because you and I can talk about the Dark Knight and the initiatory process and how potentially transformative it can be. But if there is no agreement on what is actually going on, both in our contemporary country, our democratic structure, and in climate, then the point of the Dark Knight and the initiatory process will be missed by millions of people who will deliberately choose to be in denial and in ignorance, and so plunge the world even deeper into the extinction crisis it is already. So this is very alarming.
It is. And I don't know that there's any way to reach those folks. They've drunk the Kool-Aid. And, I read an article the other day by someone who had survived Jonestown. And he was saying, this is just like Jonestown.
Right.
It really, really is. And so, I don't know how you reach people in a cult. I think there's tremendous work that we have to do to bring forth some kind of healing between these divisions of thought. And I think it's going to go down into deeper psychological layers and look at the fear and sense of betrayal that a lot of these folks are experiencing who've turned to the cult way of thinking. And if there's any way to heal this disparate position, that it might be to be able to talk with these people in a way that elicits that sorrow. The other day,
that's beautifully said. Let's just pause on that and then tell the story, because confrontation isn't going to work.
No.
demonization is certainly not going to
No.
work. The only thing that has a chance to work is the kind of true compassionate listening that could enable the other person to express the depth of pain that drew them into the cult to begin with, the depth of
Yes,
the need. Then,
absolutely.
yes.
And the other day, there was a video of a Rush Limbaugh program, and a guy had called in, and he said, you know, he's in tears, and he's saying, "There's nothing left." He's really into QAnon. "There's nothing left except you and President Trump." And then he started weeping more. "I will die for my president. I'll die for you." You know, and it was just this. Yes, it was deranged, but there was a deep pain
Love,
that
yeah.
I would like to, if I were sitting with that person, I would just like to listen. What is that pain? What caused that pain for you? What do you see in our society that caused that? And tell me about your fear. What do you fear most? Deep listening may not go anywhere, but I think it's the only way to begin to heal this division.
Well, one good thing in a way is that QAnon is now in total disarray because it believed in Trump's omnipotence as the savior of the universe. And clearly that has not come out. So there's a great deal of disappointment. I must say, I was sent an email by QAnon saying that I should stop even mentioning the Democrats with any kind of praise because Kamala Harris was eating 2 babies a day. And I'm afraid my Englishman got the better of me. So I wrote back, which I said, she looks pretty good on it. I mean, and it's amazing she finds time to do anything else because eating 2 babies a day would require a great deal of energy.
Yes, yes.
Immediately I sent it, but you have to realize there is insanity, but underneath that level of insanity, there must be an insane amount of pain and grief, and there is, and resentment and the rest of it.
Well,
So that's the beginning of healing. But the other beginning too is looking at the shadow in ourselves,
oh,
isn't it?
absolutely, absolutely.
Because there's no doubt that the terror that Trump, the trauma, the terror that Trump has imposed on us through what he's been doing constantly, has also brought out some of the really fierce, demonizing sides of our own nature,
Yes,
the hatred and rage in our own nature. Many calm-voiced, quiet-hearted liberals have become wild people because of Trump, and there is a potential deep reckoning in that for us all, that we're all capable of really projecting massive hatred on others.
yes, absolutely.
Not that it's all not deserved, but there must be another position to take, which is neither demonizing nor passive, but clear and wise and grounded and guided by sacred consciousness.
Right. And, you know, it's that word sacred is tricky. It's one of my favorite words, but it's tricky because in this culture, people hear that word and they immediately go to religion.
Right.
And they either go to anti-religion or they go to born-again Christian fundamentalist religion. And what we're talking about is something that is neither of those. We are talking about the divine within, the divine
Right.
within us.
It's nothing to do with religion. It's to do with the deep knowledge of the mystics, all of whom have gone far further than religion has ever been, to uncover the direct relationship with what lives in us and what lives all around us, created by the mystery. And that is what we're talking about.
And it lives in nature. And that is why I know you do this too, is I really encourage people to go be in nature 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day if they can, whether that's taking a walk or going to the forest preserve and sitting there and just allowing themselves to drink in the beauty and the loveliness and the wisdom of nature.
Let's return to this problem of healing, because it's going to be with our relationship to the coronavirus and the horror of what's happening in American democracy. These two crises are going to dominate us for the next bit and going to need us to turn up, and actually very much part of what we're talking about in radical regeneration as the necessary initiation. But one of the things that we have stressed in this book, and I'm so excited by this, and I'm going to be doing my set of classes on it, and you're going to be doing your set of classes on initiation as an offshoot of the book and this vision that we've co-created. I'm so excited by the remark of Jesus that what's really important in extreme circumstances, if you want to stay attuned to the sacred wisdom of reality, is to fuse the wisdom of the serpent with the innocence of the dove, the dark wisdom of the shadow, the deepest, darkest, least illusioned wisdom that you can possibly have when you look at reality here just as it is, with the innocence of the dove, with the exaltation and rapture and joy and spaciousness of the essential wisdom that the mystics know to be our ultimate reality. And so, how do you think we could use this marriage of the wisdom of the serpent and the innocence of the dove to begin a deeper healing of these divisions? I think this is the real question before us. How do we take healing into the depths of ourselves? How are we healed most deeply ourselves so as to become sources of healing for others? Because that in the end is what it's going to take in a situation as extremely divided and broken as the one we find ourselves in.
Well, really what I was talking about a while ago, where, now I don't have any Trump supporters in my life, but if I did, and if I really wanted to begin this process for real, to absolutely sit and ask these people, what are you afraid of about what's happening? And what is your sorrow? What is your sense of betrayal? How do you feel sold out? And just listen. And in there are going to be some grains of truth that I will certainly agree with. There'll be much that I don't agree with. But, to be empathic about that and to say, I understand that piece. I really do. And
I'm angry about it too.
I'm angry about it too. It wasn't fair, you know. And so, and then to question, well, do you think that the approach that you're taking is going to work? Do you think that's going to make your life better and easier? And is that going to help your children? What do you, to just be a curious listener. And
I think that's a wonderful
you
start.
might be nauseated through the whole thing, but you're reaching out in a way that is not judgmental, and you're listening for some truth, and it might hurt you too, but it begins that process of reconciliation.
And you listen to what they say about your position also, and
Yes,
see
yes.
how you can be perceived easily in a convincing way as their version of you. That is very enlightening. But there is a much more difficult question, and that is, what do we do about the great crimes and the great corruption? We simply cannot afford
No,
pardoning Nixon this time.
no.
And how do we balance justice with vengeance? How do we make sure that the justice that needs and must be done is purified of an aggressive, gleeful, bright-eyed vengeance, which will inevitably only increase the resistance and the madness? So these are koans which we're going to need to have to steer through, guided by deeper and deeper sacred wisdom.
I don't think that the federal government, for example, should, certainly at the beginning, I don't think they should start mounting a big campaign to go
No.
after Trump. But there are so many people on the state level who have prosecutions directed at him. They're sort of waiting like crouched predators until he's not president anymore. And then I think that federally and personally and locally, we can support their efforts. we can definitely support their efforts and all that they are trying to expose. We think we know a lot about his crime at this point. We probably know only a thimbleful of what has really happened. Crimes against people, against the earth, I can't even imagine. And so to support people who have the authority to go
To
after.
actually go forward. But even then, what we're also going to need to do, and I think this is important, is to hold in our hearts the people whose hearts are going to be broken by what they learn. Because there will be a whole group of people who say it's just the deep state, it's not true.
Sure.
This, and then there'll be another group of people who really don't care, love him anyway, because they're mad for him, he's their God. But there will be a whole significant, potentially a whole significant group of people who go through what some of the Germans went through after the Second World War, a massive guilt and heartbreak about that. And we need to be prepared for that as part of this evolutionary wisdom, and we need to hold out hands of love and tolerance and forgiveness and compassion to people who are going through that, because there, but for the grace of our particular brand of delusion, we would be.
Well, we already see some folks like that. We see Rick Bright. We see Olivia.
The one who, yes, and
Olivia
Miles
Troy.
Taylor, and
Yeah.
yes,
And we see Chris Krebs, and we see a number of whistleblowers, Alexander Vindman, and some of
yes.
those folks that we can reach out to and we can support, because the scales have come off of their eyes and they're personally psychologically devastated, and they're
Absolutely.
looking for ways to serve. They're looking for ways to atone and make right, and so we can support them in that.
Michael Cohen is a wonderful example, and you
Absolutely.
and I have talked a lot about
Yeah,
Michael Cohen,
yeah,
and we both have immense real love for him and real respect for him.
yeah.
It's an incredible service that his own search for redemption has driven him to do.
Yes,
But
yes.
there's still a huge pain in him at what he has let happen and what he has colluded with. That's his to sort out, but we can certainly pour out our admiration and respect and welcoming him into a larger community with that respect, to give him hope for the rest of his life, because a man like him has extraordinary abilities which he hasn't always used for the good, but which now, given what he's been through, he can use in and has been using in
Yes,
the most creative, amazing ways.
yeah, absolutely.
All of this is part of what we have gone into in depth in
Yes.
our book, which is why we're having these fortnightly conversations, because the book that we wrote was a distillation of 40 years.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And it's for now. And we really would love it if, for the price of a decent breakfast, you just got our book and worked with it. And we will be able, together with the information that we brought through from our different journeys, really give you some saving creative insight in what is going to continue to be an unbelievably difficult passage. And let's just meet every 2 weeks and really plunge into the crises that will be exploding, because they will all be relevant to radical regeneration, because we created the book for that, to be through this exploding landscape.
I totally agree with you, Andrew, and I look forward to our next conversation.
I love you, Carolyn. Thank you.
Thank you.